The battlefield was silent, save for the distant crackling of fire and the low howl of the wind cutting through the wreckage. Snowflakes drifted through the air, mixing with the rising smoke, settling over shattered bodies, most of them alien, some of them human. Blood, both red and sickly blue-green, stained the frozen ground. 3 soldiers stood at the center of it all, their rifles still hot, steam rising from the barrels. Sergeant Cole adjusted his grip on his machine gun, his fingers stiff from the cold and exhaustion. His sharp blue eyes scanned the carnage before him, wary of movement. He had seen enough battles to know that silence never meant safety. To his right, Corporal Diaz spat onto the ground, rolling his shoulders like a boxer before the next round. His dark hair was matted with sweat, his combat armor scarred and dented. "That all they got?" he muttered, kicking aside a lifeless alien corpse. The creature's exoskeleton cracked under his boot, leaking dark fluid onto the snow. Private Lin, the youngest of the 3, exhaled sharply, his breath visible in the freezing air. He tightened his hold on his weapon, his knuckles pale beneath his gloves. His dark eyes darted nervously from one alien body to the next, waiting for something, anything, to twitch back to life. "We should move," he said, his voice steady but edged with unease. "Command's expecting a status report." Cole didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the ridge in the distance, where their squad had been stationed before the ambush. The bodies of their fallen comrades lay scattered across the battlefield, some half buried in the snow, others still clutching their weapons in a death grip. 12 men had come to secure this outpost. Now, only 3 remained. Diaz followed his gaze. "We walked right into it," he muttered, shaking his head. Command said, "Light resistance." This wasn't light. "No," Cole agreed, his voice low. "It wasn't. It had been an ambush." The aliens had waited, hidden beneath the snow, their bodies adapted to blend into the terrain. The moment the squad had stepped into position, the enemy had struck with ruthless efficiency, cutting them down before they had a chance to regroup. Only Cole, Diaz, and Lin had fought their way free. Now, they were stranded, low on ammunition, and surrounded by a battlefield littered with the dead. A distant screech echoed through the air, faint but distinct. Lin flinched. That sounded close. Cole turned in the direction of the sound, scanning the horizon. Shadows moved in the distance, shifting between the skeletal remains of destroyed vehicles and makeshift barricades. The aliens weren't finished. They were regrouping. Diaz exhaled through his nose, gripping his machine gun tighter. "Well, that's just perfect." Cole took a step forward, his boots crunching in the snow. "We hold this ground." Lin hesitated. "Sergeant, with all due respect, we need to get the hell out of here." "We will," Cole said. "But not yet." The mission had been simple: secure the outpost, establish a forward position, and hold until reinforcements arrived. But the mission had changed. Now, it wasn't about the outpost. It was about survival. Diaz glanced at his ammunition counter. "Running low. Won't last another wave." "Then make every shot count," Cole said. Another screech pierced the air, closer this time. The enemy was coming. The soldiers moved quickly, taking defensive positions behind a half-destroyed supply vehicle. The armor plating would provide cover, but not for long. Lin checked his rifle, his hands shaking slightly. "How many do you think?" Cole didn't look away from the shifting shadows. "Enough." Silence settled over them, thick and suffocating. Then, the darkness moved. The first alien lunged forward, its insectoid limbs digging into the snow, mandibles snapping. Cole fired first, his machine gun roaring to life, cutting the creature down before it reached them. More followed, emerging from the fog like specters of death, their movements swift and unnatural. Diaz let out a sharp laugh, wild and unhinged. "Here we go." He squeezed the trigger, mowing down a cluster of enemies, their bodies crumpling under the onslaught of bullets. Lin hesitated only a fraction of a second before joining in, his rifle kicking against his shoulder as he fired in controlled bursts. The aliens fell, but more came, relentless, endless. Cole focused his shots, aiming for the vulnerable spots in their armor. He had fought these creatures before, he knew their weaknesses. A well-placed shot to the throat, a burst through the eye sockets, a high-caliber round to the chest cavity. One by one, they dropped. A deafening screech tore through the chaos, different from the others. Cole barely had time to react before something massive crashed through the wreckage, a larger alien, armored like a tank, its claws capable of slicing through steel. "Shit!" Diaz shouted, ducking as the creature swung at him. Lin fired, but the bullets barely dented its thick plating. "That thing is bulletproof." Cole didn't hesitate. He grabbed the last grenade from his belt, pulling the pin with his teeth. "Cover me." Diaz and Lin opened fire, forcing the beast to slow, its movements erratic under the barrage of bullets. Cole sprinted forward, the cold air biting at his face. At the last second, he slid beneath the creature's swinging claws, shoving the grenade into the exposed joint beneath its torso. He rolled away as the explosion detonated, sending alien flesh and metal fragments flying. The creature collapsed with a guttural hiss, its limbs twitching before going still. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, the remaining aliens hesitated, their charge faltering. Diaz let out a breathless chuckle. "Damn, Sarge." Lin, panting, looked at the smoldering corpse. Is that it?" Cole reloaded his weapon, his jaw set. "Not even close." The distant screeches began again, more voices joining the chorus. The enemy was still out there. They were regrouping, preparing for another assault. Lin swallowed hard. "Command needs to send backup. Now." Cole lifted his comm device, but all he got was static. The outpost's communication relay had been destroyed in the ambush. No signal. No way to call for help. Diaz ran a hand through his damp hair. "So, what? We just sit here and wait to die." Cole stared at the horizon, where dark shapes shifted in the fog. He tightened his grip on his weapon. "No," he said. "We make them regret coming here." The wind howled through the broken landscape, carrying the distant screeches of the enemy as they gathered beyond the wreckage. Cole adjusted his grip on his weapon, his fingers numb from the cold, his mind sharp with adrenaline. He knew what came next. The first wave had only been a test, a probe to gauge their defenses. The real attack was coming. Diaz leaned against the charred husk of a transport vehicle, exhaling sharply. His face was streaked with sweat and grime, his dark eyes scanning the battlefield with a mix of exhaustion and defiance. "They're taking their time," he muttered. "Planning something." Lin crouched nearby, reloading his rifle with quick, precise movements. His hands were steadier now, the fear that had gripped him earlier tempered by the rush of survival. "We can't hold forever," he said. "We need to find a way out of here." Cole shook his head. "No way out." He gestured toward the ridge where their squad had been wiped out. "Beyond that, nothing but open terrain, suicide to run. If we move, we die. Here, we've got cover." Diaz huffed a bitter laugh. "Yeah, cover. Until they bring something big enough to level it." The distant screeches sharpened into a rhythmic chittering sound, a chorus of clicking mandibles and shifting limbs. The aliens were communicating, coordinating. Their patience was unsettling. Normally, these creatures fought like berserkers, throwing themselves at human defenses with reckless aggression. But this was different. Calculated. Cole didn't like it. A sudden movement caught his eye, something shifting in the wreckage ahead. Too smooth, too deliberate to be the wind. He snapped his rifle up, finger tightening on the trigger. Contact. The others followed his aim, eyes narrowing. At first, there was nothing. Then, from the shadows of a broken vehicle, an alien emerged, alone, unarmed. Its exoskeleton shimmered in the dim light, a dark, chitinous shell streaked with blood, some of it human. Lin sucked in a sharp breath. Why isn't it attacking? Cole didn't lower his weapon. "It's scouting. Testing us." Diaz scoffed, raising his machine gun. "Well, test this." He squeezed the trigger. The alien's head snapped back as bullets tore through its skull, sending it crumpling into the snow. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, the enemy answered. The second wave came fast. Shadows erupted from the ruins, moving with terrifying speed. The soldiers barely had time to react before the air was filled with the sound of gunfire, shrieking aliens, and the deep, guttural growls of the larger ones leading the charge. Cole fired in controlled bursts, each shot precise, each kill calculated. Diaz's machine gun roared, cutting down entire clusters of enemies before they could close the distance. Lin, moving with desperate efficiency, picked off flankers with steady, practiced shots. Still, they kept coming. An alien leaped onto the wreckage, claws raised to strike. Lin pivoted, firing a burst into its chest. The creature staggered but didn't fall. Its mandibles spread wide in a feral hiss before lunging again. Lin barely had time to react before Cole's knife flashed through the air, embedding deep in the alien's throat. The creature gurgled, stumbling back, and Cole finished it with a point-blank shot to the head. "Stay sharp," he barked, retrieving his knife. Diaz let out a pained grunt as something slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. A massive alien loomed over him, its thick armor plates making bullets nearly useless. Diaz fought back, gripping the creature's mandibles with both hands, keeping its snapping jaws away from his face. Cole didn't hesitate. He turned his rifle, aiming for the exposed joint beneath its arm. One shot. Ugh. The alien shrieked as its limb went limp, giving Diaz just enough leverage to shove it off. He rolled aside, drew his sidearm, and emptied the clip into the creature's head. "Shit," Diaz panted, scrambling back to his feet. His armor was scratched, a long gash running down his shoulder. These bastards are getting smarter. Cole already knew that. The aliens weren't just attacking, they were adapting. Every missed shot, every failed strike, they were learning. Then, the ground trembled. A deep, resonating thud echoed through the battlefield. Lin looked up, horror flashing across his face. "Tell me that's not..." A massive shape emerged from the fog, twice the size of the others, its body encased in thick, metallic plating, its 4 arms ending in wickedly curved blades. It moved with slow, deliberate purpose, its beady black eyes locking onto the 3 soldiers. Diaz exhaled sharply. "That's new." Cole didn't wait. Hit it with everything. Their weapons roared, bullets hammering against the creature's armor. The smaller aliens scattered, clearing a path for their champion. The beast advanced unfazed, the rounds bouncing off its reinforced plating. Lin cursed. "Nothing's getting through." The creature lunged. The soldiers barely dodged in time as one of its bladed arms slammed into the wreckage, shearing through metal like paper. Diaz reached for his last grenade. "We need to get under that armor." Cole nodded. "Draw it out." "Lin, cover fire." Lin fired at the creature's head, distracting it while Cole and Diaz moved. The beast swiped at them, fast despite its size. Cole dove left, Diaz right. The alien hesitated, momentarily uncertain which target to pursue. That moment was enough. Diaz darted in, pulling the pin on his grenade. He threw himself under the beast, shoving the explosive into a gap beneath its torso. The alien roared, twisting violently. Diaz barely had time to roll away before the grenade detonated. The blast ripped through its underbelly, sending a shock wave of heat and shrapnel through the air. The creature staggered, its limbs jerking erratically before it collapsed in a lifeless heap. The battlefield fell silent again. Cole pushed himself up, catching his breath. Lin stared at the smoldering corpse, his hands shaking. "Did we just..." Diaz let out a breathless chuckle. "Damn right we did." Cole didn't smile. His gut told him this wasn't over. The aliens weren't just throwing bodies at them anymore. They were thinking, strategizing. And that meant something worse was coming. He glanced at the sky, hoping for a sign of reinforcements. Nothing but the swirling snow. They were still alone. And the enemy wasn't done yet. The silence after the explosion was brief, a momentary pause before the battlefield exhaled again. Smoke curled from the remains of the massive alien, its armored corpse still twitching in death. The 3 soldiers stood amid the carnage, weapons raised, hearts hammering. No one spoke. No one moved. They listened. The wind whistled through the wreckage, carrying the scent of burning flesh and blood, both human and alien. Somewhere in the distance, a piece of metal groaned as it shifted under the weight of snow. But there were no more screeches, no more rustling bodies in the shadows. Cole exhaled slowly. His grip on his rifle loosened, just slightly. The battle wasn't over, but they had bought themselves time. Diaz broke the silence first, nudging the smoldering carcass with his boot. "We're gonna need a bigger gun," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. His armor was battered, his exposed skin streaked with grime, but his grin was intact. Lin took a cautious step forward, scanning the remains of their enemies. His breath came in short, uneven bursts, but there was something steadier in his posture now, confidence where hesitation had been before. He had survived. He was still standing. "That was different," he said quietly. Cole nodded. "They're testing us." Diaz scoffed. "They can keep testing. We'll keep failing them." But Cole wasn't convinced. The aliens were adapting, learning. The waves of mindless attacks had changed into something more deliberate, more controlled. The next move wouldn't be another charge. It would be something else, something worse. He turned his attention to their surroundings. The battlefield was littered with wreckage, the bodies of their fallen squadmates half buried in the snow. The outpost they had come to secure was nothing more than a charred ruin, its comms tower snapped in half, its defenses obliterated. There was no extraction point anymore, no fallback position. They were stranded. Lin wiped his gloved hand across his face, leaving a streak of dirt across his cheek. "What's the plan?" Cole considered their options. Staying meant certain death. Moving meant uncertainty, possibly a quicker death, possibly a slim chance of survival. Diaz must have read his expression. "I'm gonna take a wild guess and say we're not digging in here." Cole shook his head. "We move. Head east toward the ridge. If command sent reinforcements, that's where they'll be." Lin hesitated. "And if there's nothing there? Then we improvise." Diaz sighed, rolling his shoulders. "Great. Love improvising." They started moving. Their boots crunched against the snow, the sound too loud in the stillness. Every step felt like an invitation for another ambush. Cole led the way, his rifle raised, eyes scanning the wreckage. The battle had left scars on the land, shattered vehicles, craters where explosives had torn through the earth, and bodies frozen in their final moments. The three soldiers moved with purpose, but the weight of exhaustion was beginning to settle in. Their muscles ached, their ammunition was dangerously low, and the cold was beginning to seep through their armor. The adrenaline that had kept them standing was starting to wear thin. Diaz kept his voice low as they walked. "You ever think about how weird this war is? Us, fighting things that don't even belong on this planet." Cole didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everyone thought about it. The aliens had come without warning, without demands, without reason. Humanity hadn't even had time to understand why before the fighting started. Lin shifted his grip on his rifle. "You think there's a reason they're doing this?" Diaz snorted. "Doesn't matter. They picked a fight. We finish it." Cole agreed with that much. The reason didn't matter. Not here, not now. All that mattered was making it out alive. Then, something changed. Cole halted mid-step, holding up a fist. The others froze instantly. A sound, a faint, rhythmic clicking, echoed through the air. Not the chaotic screeches of the horde, but something more controlled. Lin whispered, "That's different." Cole's grip on his weapon tightened. "Yeah." The clicking grew louder, coming from ahead, near the ridge. Then, shapes emerged from the snow, tall, armored figures, their chitin gleaming under the dim light. But these weren't like the others. They didn't charge. They stood still, waiting, watching. Diaz let out a low curse. "You've gotta be kidding me." There were 5 of them, each one different from the standard soldiers they had been fighting. Their exoskeletons were thicker, their postures more upright. These weren't mindless drones. These were something else. Leaders. Cole felt his stomach twist. The aliens weren't just adapting their tactics. They were evolving their battlefield command. And now, They were staring directly at the last 3 humans left standing. One of the creatures tilted its head, its mandibles twitching as if studying them. Then, in a movement so quick it was nearly a blur, it raised its arm and pointed. A challenge. Diaz exhaled slowly. Oh, they want to make this personal. Lin swallowed hard. Orders, Sergeant. Cole didn't look away from the creatures. He could see it in their posture. They weren't rushing into this fight. They were confident. They believed they had already won. Maybe they had. But he wasn't going down without a fight. Cole squared his shoulders, gripping his rifle tight. We make them regret stepping onto our planet. The aliens moved. So did the soldiers. The final battle had begun. The world shrank to a single moment, the breath before the storm. Snow swirled in restless spirals, caught between the standoff of 2 species. Cole felt the weight of the rifle in his hands, the strain in his muscles, the slow, deliberate rise and fall of his chest. Across from them, the 5 alien commanders stood motionless, their unreadable black eyes fixed on the last 3 soldiers left standing. Then, without warning, the silence shattered. The lead alien lunged, closing the distance faster than anything its lesser kin had managed. Cole barely had time to shift his rifle before the creature was on him, its bladed arms slashing through the air. He twisted, dodging the strike by inches, the wind of its passing cold against his cheek. Diaz and Lin opened fire. Their weapons roared, muzzle flashes painting streaks of light against the white snow. The second and third aliens darted into motion, moving in coordinated strikes, dodging and weaving between bullets with terrifying precision. These weren't mindless beasts, they were warriors. Cole fired at close range, his bullets slamming into the first alien's armor, but it barely staggered. It moved with terrifying grace, its 4 limbs working in tandem, forcing him back with a relentless flurry of attacks. Diaz let out a sharp grunt as one of the creatures tackled him, slamming him into the ground. He wrestled against its crushing weight, his machine gun pinned beneath him. Snarling, he drove his combat knife between its plated ribs. The alien screeched, its mandibles snapping at his face as dark ichor spilled from the wound. Diaz twisted the blade deeper, teeth bared in fury. Lin, moving with desperate precision, dropped into a crouch as another alien swung at him. He rolled beneath its attack, coming up with his sidearm and firing directly into its eye. The alien reeled, shrieking, and he followed up with another shot to the throat. It collapsed, twitching in the snow. Cole, still locked in brutal combat with the lead alien, felt his strength fading. He had never fought something this fast, this relentless. Every move he made, the creature countered. Every attack he tried, it dodged. Then, in a moment of pure instinct, he let it strike, baiting it in. The alien lunged, going for the kill. But Cole had already moved. He pivoted, letting the creature's momentum carry it forward, then drove the butt of his rifle into the side of its head. Stunned, it stumbled, and he didn't hesitate. He switched his grip, pressing the barrel against the base of its skull. One shot. The alien went rigid. A tremor passed through its limbs, then it crumpled into the snow, lifeless. Cole turned just in time to see Diaz shove the dead weight of his opponent off him, chest heaving. Lin stood over his own kill, his breath a ragged mist in the cold air. Only 2 aliens remained, their bodies coiled in unreadable tension. And then, as suddenly as they had attacked, they stopped. The remaining aliens stepped back, their black eyes scanning the battlefield littered with their fallen. The clicking sounds they made were lower now, more measured. Communicating. Calculating. Then, without another move, they turned and disappeared into the snowstorm. Diaz exhaled sharply, wiping blood from his face. Oh, hell no. They don't get to run. Cole didn't lower his rifle. His entire body was still humming with the aftershock of battle, his nerves sharp, his muscles aching. But he didn't move to chase them. They learned something today, Lin said, his voice hoarse. So did we. Diaz scoffed. Yeah. That they can't kill us as easy as they thought. Cole knew it was more than that. This wasn't just another fight in an endless war. This had been a test, not just for the aliens, but for them. The enemy wasn't just getting smarter. They were learning how to fight like humans. And next time, they wouldn't retreat. The three soldiers stood in the aftermath, surrounded by the bodies of the fallen. Snow continued to drift down, covering the blood, covering the scars of battle. Somewhere in the distance, a faint signal crackled in Cole's earpiece. A transmission. Oh. He clicked his radio on, voice steady despite the exhaustion in his bones. Command, this is Sergeant Cole. We're still here.